Welcome once again to the Old Cow Report, and I'm your host, Chuck Lee, and we appreciate your tuning in tonight and to the 1738th show in the series, and we appreciate all the many years that you've tuned in. And of course, as usual, with me is my rusty, trusty sidekick, Fred, the Truth Stafford. Well, he's not here. There he is. Fred, the Truth Stafford. Well, there's his microphone cable, but he's not anywhere to be found. So once again, ladies and gentlemen, for the 14th time in the history of the Old Cow Report, we have to put out an all-points bulletin for Fred, the Truth Stafford. Beware if you see him. Do not approach him. Call a local dog catcher or call a local policeman and have them help you if you do see him, because he could be disoriented. So this is an all-points bulletin for Fred, the Truth Stafford. Let's see now. He stands about 6 foot tall, and he'll have a big button with something about anti-abortion on it. Usually wears some kind of sports coat, red pants, green shoes, a brown tie, and he'll have a great big red scarf, and he's got a cane, and he's probably walking down on Water Street somewhere around the American Legion. So if you see him, do not approach him. I repeat, do not approach him. Call here to the studios. Roy will give the emergency call-in number if you see Fred. What is that number, Roy? Well, you can hardly see it down there, but that's the number. Guess it fell off the end of the table. All right, so anyway, that number again, Roy, is 839. If you put some black outline on that, Roy, it'll just look dandy. 839-6261? Yeah, 839-6261. Of course, if you'd like to call into the show, and there's the number, cow phone. If you'd like to call into the show and report missing persons special hotline, 839-6261. Of course, if you can't get to the phone, you can always email us at cows@discover-net.net on the internet. There we go, the cow phone, 839-6261, and let us know if you find the Fred out there. Now remember, he's got a great big red scarf on, kind of one of those winter scarves, the ones you can throw over. He's got a great big sombrero on, one of the Mexican ones with the point up on it, and green shoes, red pants, a brown tie, and one of those plaid green and red and yellow blazers. So you should be able to see him if you see him down there on Water Street. And Roy will be taking phone calls and letting me know if there's any emergency sightings. Right, Roy? Okay. All right, in the meantime, in this date in history, Walt Disney's famous duck made his first appearance as a bit player on film this day in 1934 in a little short comic strip called, or comic video called The Wise Little Hen. Donald Duck went on to quack his way into mischief and stardom in 127 cartoons and features before his final appearance in 1991. I don't know what happened to him after that. It seems like you still see him on TV, but here it is. He was popular for about 27 years, and then he must have died in 1961. The duck is known the world over and is the best recognized Disney creation after Mickey Mouse. His girlfriend, Daisy, was seen for the first time in 1937, and then he had kids that came later in the form of nephews, Huey, Dewey, Louie, along with Donald's miserly uncle, Scrooge McDuck. All have appeared not only in films but also in comic books and TV cartoons. And the original voice of Donald Duck was Clarence Nash. And that's what happened on this date in history, the first time we were able to see Donald Duck. Okay, 1924, Jelly Roll Blues was recorded by blues great Jelly Roll Morton and his band for General Records. And I heard a call coming in there. We might have somebody who cited Fred, the Truth Stafford. I also had some birth dates on here. Yeah, okay. And let's see, this date in 1916, two famous people were born on this date. One's a man called Les Paul, and the other one's a man called Robert McNamara. And they both played a very pivotal role in the Vietnam War. Maybe somebody can call in and tell me which one did what during the 60s. Go ahead, caller, you're on the air.
Yeah, I was wondering, what color sombrero was that?
One of them great big ones that looks like it's made out of straw.
Cool.
It's a great big thing with, it's kind of about 10 times as wide as this.
Cool.
And then he has one of those, you know, one of them Mexican blankets. He has that thrown over one shoulder.
Okay.
So you might see him out underneath of a tree somewhere with a little bottle of tequila or something, or he might just be walking back and forth on Water Street down by the Legion. So.
He should be very noticeable.
Right, with that sombrero and those green shoes. I think somebody would be able to see him.
Yeah, I know.
Have you seen him?
Well, I've seen big sombreros. I'll call you back if I see him, okay?
All right. Thanks for calling in. Well, there was a near sighting. Much as like people that see UFOs, they see near sightings, but they don't really see the real thing. Okay, let's see what else happened on this date in history many, many years ago. Larry Holmes, 1978, beat Ken Norton to claim the heavyweight boxing title in a 15-round decision in Las Vegas, Nevada. Now, there was two guys that could really fight. Larry Holmes was called the Easton Assassin. I think it was out of Pennsylvania. Ken Norton was the man that broke Muhammad Ali's jaw. And I think Muhammad Ali went on to finish that fight, but that was a brutal fight between Norton and Ali. And of course, Larry Holmes sent many people to the canvas. He was a tough character too, and I think later on he was beat by one of the Spinks boys. And Larry Holmes, 1978. I think he's made a comeback here in the last few years. He's in his middle 40s now, but he's back boxing again because unfortunately a lot of those boxers were taken advantage of by unscrupulous managers and handlers and money handlers, and they pretty much lost most of their fortunes before they even saw the checks. After a bout, they would have most of the money spent on all of the hangers-ons and all the promotional and the managers and the people that signed them to contracts that got them into these very poor contracts where they would maybe realize 5 or 10% of a $5 million fight after everything was paid out. So people like Larry Holmes and George Foreman and them had to get back in the ring and make their fortunes all over again because of the losses earlier in their life. Go ahead, caller, you're on the air.
Chuck, how's it going tonight?
All right. Have you seen Fred out there anywhere?
No, I haven't.
If you're cruising down on Water Street, just keep your eyes peeled because...
Keep that in mind. McNamara, he was Secretary of Defense under Kennedy, wasn't he?
That's for sure.
Yeah.
And who was the other guy?
I don't remember. What was the other name? I didn't catch that one. I just tuned in.
Les Paul.
Les Paul?
Yeah.
Is he a relative of Congressman Ron Paul out of Texas?
Well, he might be, but he's world famous for making a guitar called the Les Paul guitar.
Oh, okay. Well,
just about every classic rock guitarist, from Eric Clapton to Beatles to even a lot of your country and western stars. I think even Waylon Jennings and a lot of the people have at least one Les Paul guitar in their collection.
Oh, okay.
I think, as a matter of fact, there's a Miller Lite commercial out with Les Paul in it now. But he's getting up there in years now, but he made a world-famous guitar that is well known for its quality sound. And him and Robert McNamara were both born on the same date, and the Les Paul guitar was very praised and highly sought after during the 60s.
Oh, what year were they born?
1916.
Oh, wow.
I think that's right around the time Fred was born.
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah.
What's the topic tonight? Anything on local government?
Well, what's going on out there? You're
I
from,
don't know. I just, this is the source for all the up-to-date news on local government.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. It's getting hard to get around State Street these days.
Oh, they got it detoured?
Yeah, you got to go all the way up Plank Hill.
Oh, boy.
And over to Claremont, or you can go down the other way by the courthouse and come down into the downtown area.
Oh, I see. Okay. What's going on in this hall? Anything?
This fall,
No, what's going on in City Hall?
City Hall. I think they shut it down for the summer, and they all went north carp fishing.
Wow, who's that guy coming in?
There's a big run on carp this time of year. I think all the city council members, they've done their damage, and they're all up north carp fishing.
All right, well, maybe Fred's got a hot topic. I'll get off the phone, and we better get Fred on
Ladies
the
and
air.
gentlemen, somebody found Fred the true staffer.
Oh, that's good. Okay, good luck.
All right, well, thanks for calling in there. Well, there you have it, Fred.
Yes,
Don't you know that we've been looking all over for you? We had an all-points bulletin out on Water Street. Where you been?
I was at a meeting at the Legion.
Huh.
Unfortunately, I didn't see that the time was 9 o'clock when I left there.
Where's your other hat at?
What?
Where's your other hat?
Which other hat?
The one that people were looking for you under. Okay, well, while Fred is getting his clothes on, yeah, we'll have to go to some very important news that I got out of a underground newsletter that Fred gave me, and it's pretty disturbing. I read this last night, and I kind of found it hard to believe, but on the other hand, maybe it's not too hard to believe. But it was talking about 3 million foreign troops that are right now inside of the United States, Fred.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what do you know about that?
Just what you read there.
Here, you better get that up there where you can talk now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
All right, Roy, is that mic working?
Yes, sir. Hello there.
All right. Where was that at, Fred? That deal about the 3 million.
It's in there. I don't remember where, but...
All right, here it is. Will Red China invade America? That's the question on this. It says here, according to sources within the U.S. Congress, I didn't give the sources, but it says, according to sources within the U.S. Congress, there is now over 3 million foreign troops positioned throughout North America, with most of these being German, Russian, and Red Chinese. In this country, prisons are becoming a boon business, and new railroad tracks are being laid into border states along the Canadian border in anticipation of extensive troop and heavy equipment movement, Russian and Red Chinese coming in from the West Coast. Now, Fred, that could possibly tie in with Costco and that deep sea water port where the Chinese will be able to...
Long Beach.
They'll be able to bring in shipload after shipload of all kinds of contraband. And when you read that article, Fred, didn't it say something about where they're only going to be able to maybe look at one
out of 8.
and 1 out of 8 containers?
Yes.
Now, the containers are about as big as a semi. And they seal them over in China, and they put them on ships and then ship them over here, and they'll have them stacked on top of each other, and there might be several, I don't know, 100 or quite a few of them stacked on in a ship. Then they're lifted off, sealed, and put onto the dock. And you're saying maybe 1 out of 8 of those is even going to be inspected by who? Are they going to have Chinese inspectors? We're going to just trust them, or what?
Well, that's going to be the customs is going to inspect them.
All right. Okay, now here's, according to a very intelligent source in New England, the Red Chinese are very much anticipating an amphibious invasion of America from the west. A BBC television reporter interviewing Chinese soldiers training in Formosa. Now, of course, Formosa is Taiwan.
Yeah.
It's one and the same. It's the small island off mainland China where the anti-communists fled to after the downfall of China in 1949. It's modern-day Taiwan. But these Chinese soldiers were training near Formosa, and they were asked by a BBC television reporter, "What are you preparing to use this training for?" And the soldier said, "For the coming invasion of America." When it became clear a gap in security was created by airing this on English television, scheduled rebroadcast the next day was hastily canceled, Fred. And apparently a task force has been in existence for a long time, headed up by Ira Magaziner, the pseudo-communist in the Clinton administration. This will allow for Red Chinese troops to train on American soil. In the meantime, our American military is being downsized, dismembered, demoralized. If you don't think it's being demoralized, just watch CNN the last 2 months. With that one guy that got 20 years for raping female soldiers.
Yeah.
Now a guy in line for Joint Chiefs of Staff,
Yeah.
the top military man in the United States. He had to step aside. He can't take that position. They're going to have to find a new one because of some things in his past. And then the female Air Force pilot that had to take a less than honorable discharge.
Finn.
She took a less than
Right.
desirable or not the best discharge to get out of her situation. So there's part of the demoralization. So they're being downsized, number one. If you don't believe that, go all around the country and talk to people where Army and Air Force bases used to be,
Yes.
and naval bases,
Right.
like Rantoul, Illinois, and where Costco is going in. That used to be a giant military base.
Yes.
And how about the Presidio?
Yes, Gorbachev, that was given to him.
The communist leader of the Soviet Union now has control of another one of our bases called the Presidio out west.
Yes.
But, okay, there's where they're downsized. Dismembered, demoralized, and deported. Being deported, we've taken our American soldiers and we've shipped them all around the world for peacekeeping purposes. Saudi
Yes.
Arabia, Israel,
Yes.
formerly well, I think we still might have some.
Bosnia.
Have some in Jordan. We've got some in Bosnia. Supposedly we have some clandestine troops around Afghanistan and in Chechnya. And some of the other former Eastern European countries. We got a big contingency of American soldiers still in Japan and Germany and other parts of Europe. There's big bases in England. So we
Yes.
got troops all over the world. South Korea, Fred, we got, what, 50,000 troops.
Yes.
So all of our troops are being deployed around the world, while supposedly we have 3 million foreign troops on our soil right now. What would we do, Fred, if things fell apart and these troops decided under the leaders of a newly revitalized China and Russia? China's already revitalized. Russia's coming back real quick. What would happen if those two united and said, okay,
China and
This is
the
it.
Russians are in agreement and are working to bring this about?
I know, but what if they just decide tomorrow, if they're actually, I know we have German Air Force pilots training in the Southwest at a base.
Yes.
There are a lot of German airplanes. I don't know about this 3 million figure, though, Fred. It would be pretty hard to hide 3 million foreign troops in this country.
Well, there's a number of them in California.
Could be a few of them up in Canada.
Maybe.
I've heard and read about communist military training bases in northern Mexico, not too far from the border, that are poised that they could come across and do some damage along our southern border there, keep us pinned down there. So by being deported, they mean into Bosnia and peacekeeping forces around the world, while Russian, German, Belgian, and Red Chinese troops conduct training exercises with Soviet and soon Red Chinese military equipment within our borders. And it ends up with the sentence, "Welcome to the New World Order."
Yes.
Well, we better take this call here, Fred.
Yes.
Go ahead, caller, you're on the air.
Yes, sir. I don't know what to call you, Mr. Allman. Hello?
Yes, you're on the air.
And, well, I just wanted to say that I'm Norwegian, and I'm pretty much offended that Minnesota has a team that's called the Minnesota Vikings. I would like to
You would like it what?
pick it.
You would like to picket the Minnesota Vikings?
Yeah, I'm Norwegian, and I'm kind of offended by the fact that they call themselves the Minnesota Vikings.
What's offensive about that?
Well, because I'm Norwegian.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right, so what would you like us to change it to, or have them, what would you like them?
Crickets?
What could we change the Vikings to? Hello?
Menominee Warriors.
The Minnesota Menominee Warriors. Well, it would take millions of dollars to change all the logos and things of that nature. Okay, well, there you have it, Fred. I know there's been a big brouhaha over there in Menominee about changing from the, what is it, the Menominee Indians or
Yes.
something? To,
Right.
to the Menominee Midgets or something like that.
Yeah.
What are midgets going to say if they change it to the Menominee Midgets?
Yes.
You're going to offend midgets. Midgets. Okay. Okay, Fred, not only that, but there's Russian locomotives down in Texas.
Yes. Quite a few of them, too.
Recently, concerned citizens in Texas photographed 11 Russian-built train engines in Houston. The trains are said to be owned by U.S. Marshals. Now, what would the United States Marshals be doing with 11 giant diesel locomotives? I mean, those great big ones could pull a whole train, 50, 250 to 100, 150 boxcars at one time.
Yeah.
What would they be doing with that? U.S. Marshals, Fred. Does it ring any bells?
Yes, it rings a bell. They could be using them to pick up Americans who they want to imprison.
Something's fishy there, Fred.
I agree with you.
Okay, these engines were built in 1992 and were stored in 1993, so they're brand new. They can be seen down in the operating controls are all in Russian, while the fueling instructions are in English. 10 of them are red and 1 is blue, which is marked American Grain Company. The rail width, or the gauge, is the same as U.S. standard gauge, and all the fuel tanks are full, ready to roll. The reason this is suspicious is because we had received earlier reports that during the future gun confiscation and Patriot Roundup, that the conspirators would use foreigners to operate the trains that would transport the prisoners to concentration camps. If this is not the case, why are railroads buying Russian-built train engines? Can't American factories build our own?
Yes.
We got some pretty good
Darn tootin'.
directions to these engines. If you're down by Houston, are from downtown Houston, you go east on I-10, south on Federal Road for a half mile, take a left or east on Industrial Road, go approximately 2 miles, and the locomotives are off to the right 75 feet from the road. For anyone to see, Fred.
Yes.
Take some binoculars and you can see the Soviet-Russian engines out there. Okay, Freddie, we're going to take a call and then we're going to go right into that article you got there. Go ahead, caller, you're on the air.
Hi, Chuck.
Hello, how you doing?
Just fine. Now, your last caller, that made sense. A gentleman was wondering what was going on down at City Hall. And I'm not too sure about City Hall, but I can tell you this. A group, the stop group, part of the stop group from Eau Claire that was involved in the arena,
Oh, yeah.
had a meeting Friday with some officials that came over from Wausau who are fighting their project over there after their mayor. And one of their council persons tried to shove it through without a referendum, just shove it through on the city council board.
To have an arena in Wausau?
Well, it's not an arena. They want to build a auditorium. And
So they're going to try and push it through without a referendum.
that's right. That's right. They tried, and it didn't go too far so far. And now there possibly is a recall on at least one of the council persons, and maybe the mayor.
Huh.
Very interesting. I sat in the meeting. I was very interested in that.
Did they block it?
They have blocked it completely so far, but the mayor is not one who wants to give up. They've got all those promises on how badly it's needed. But incidentally, what is strange over there, the hotel groups aren't backing a new auditorium. The head of the one downtown, I think it's the Ramada downtown.
Oh, yeah.
He's
That's
privately opposing any ideas, and he said it's not going to help them. And if they plan to build another motel on it to this auditorium, that he said people will not drive up the highway 51, highway 51, into town to stay there anyway.
Well, you know, you look at Eau Claire, we got two magnificent rivers and coming right down the middle of the city, and there's probably 1,000 cities and towns in this United States would just love to have a picturesque river, let alone two rivers and a couple of lakes right in the middle of their town like we do, but we have underutilized those, and it's too bad that we let those, especially the Chippewa River, fill into where we couldn't get some larger sized boats and have boat trips right down to the Mississippi, right down there. So you could take a boat ride down the Mississippi and come back up. But they've let it all get washed into where there's sandbars, and you can't pretty much go any more than a canoe down there. But at one time they used to have boats coming up and down the river. They used to have a lot of logging, and they just they wasted that. But even more than that, though, the banks along the east and west side of the Chippewa River and the north and south side of the Eau Claire River are underutilized for recreational and for restaurants, and all kinds of things could have been put along them. And I was down in La Crosse the other day, and they've got that beautiful hotel right there on the river, right on the Mississippi there, Fred. And they got and you look out there, and there's a paddle boat, a steamboat, right there. You can hop on and take a ride. And they've they've taken advantage of having those tributaries of the Mississippi right there in town, where we've been barely able to get a little dinky bike trail after many years of fighting on that. And then the bike trail in a lot of spots is not even near the river. We don't have a decent riverside drive where you can drive right along the river and see the beauty of it. You don't have one decent restaurant, or one restaurant at all that I could think of right on the river. You don't really have anywhere that's really nice or organized where you can have I guess there's a couple places where you can put a boat in, but this city has just they've not taken advantage of what we have.
Absolutely. Say, Doug, say, one of the things, the little action that is on City Hall, you read the newspaper last night and saw the picture of that lady sitting by her tree up on Gateway Drive.
Yeah, the one her dad planted.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, that picture was a very beautiful picture, and it tells the whole story, how she doesn't want to give her land up. Reading the story, been in the family for maybe 60 years or so, and they're just pushing, and how the city of Eau Claire go into the town of Washington and push this little lady around. It's too bad.
Well, I thought the town of Washington, is it inside the city limits, or is that a township out there?
Well, the part that that lady owns is in the town of Washington, and it has been annexed to Eau Claire.
Well, you'd think the town of Washington come to her aid then, the city of Eau Claire pushing around the town of Washington.
They finally are. I think Mike Peterson was mentioned in that article finally, that the town of Washington is going to maybe help out.
Well, see, the town of Eau Claire, or the city of Eau Claire, went up there and was pushing around Haley for several years until finally the people in Haley had enough of it and said, get out. This is our town.
Well, I'm kind of hoping that's what the town of Washington will do. They could run the road right up in what is now Gateway Industrial Park.
I'll tell you, you got to watch Eau Claire. You can't put it past them. They'll sneak around and they'll annex your land into the city without even telling you.
Yes, right. I did hear this morning that a city can't, like Eau Claire, can't condemn this lady's property. she's in the town of Washington, so I'm sure they're going to have to find a way around it. But it is too bad. If you look at it, and it's just a sad situation that we see this going on, and only to help our own millionaires.
Yeah. Well, what are they doing? Why are they making the road change so over there? To get over to one of them multi-billion or multi-million dollar high schools or something over there, or grade schools? What's the big deal about the road over there?
I don't know. If you look at the map, excuse me, I'm sure you can't figure it out either. They eventually, though, want to connect, they say to Hamilton Avenue, but they want to connect that someday to Highway 12, which will be as Mike Peterson mentions, a shortcut for the truck to run down the mall.
Oh.
It's senseless. They run in the Gateway Industrial Park for about 3/4 of the way, and then they turn west, look at the map, and they turn into the town of Washington and then run north again.
Huh.
And it's right up to this lady's land. It's a sad.
Well, maybe she'll call in and tell us what's going on.
Yeah, she'd be a great one to talk to.
Well, thanks for calling in, and we'll have to see if anyone else wants to call up about that issue. But in the meantime, Fred, we've all heard about the mark of the beast. Every once in a while you read
Yes.
something in the paper, or somebody talks about the book of Revelations, or somebody makes a joke about it. But here's from Illinois, a publication called Grapevine Publications website. So if anyone wants to look this up, Grapevine Publications on the web. It appears that the Illinois Department of Public Aid is requiring those who receive AFDC, Aid to Families with Dependent Children, to accept biometric identification. Now, we all have seen the pictures and the articles about the new little glass-coated bead about the size of a grain of rice that can be injected into animals for identification. They just wave a little wand across the cat and say, yeah, that's your cat. It's got the identification bead inside of it somewhere, and inside of that's a chip, inside of that little glass bead. Well, that's what they're talking about here, Fred. Biometric, B-I-O-M-E-T, B-I-O-M-E-T-I-C, identification. We know that technology is readily available for biometric implants, and that the time of their usage is near. This is just a warm-up to the main event, which will occur during the tribulation, when I guess it'd be Revelation 13, 16 through 18 is fulfilled. A friend of mine showed me a letter she received yesterday from the Illinois Department of Public Aid. It requires all people who receive AFDC to accept biometric identification or lose their assistance. I know you might think I'm making that up, so I have attached 3 images that I scanned, which is the entire letter. I wanted to send this to you because I thought you could get this information out to any Christian groups. So what do you think about that, Fred?
Well, I think it's on its way here.
What is?
This this chip business with putting it in their animals and whatnot, putting it in the human beings.
Well, I could see where they'd use something like that, Fred, to identify those that are actually entitled to their AFDC checks, food stamps, things of that nature. Because there's a lot of fraud, especially with food stamps. That's the second money in this country. Besides the greenback, the food stamp is probably the second most used currency in this country, and it's used for everything from buying Cadillacs to purchasing prostitutes to getting cigarettes and alcohol and trading food stamps for cash, sometimes 40, 50 cents on the dollar. So there is a heavy market in that, but that's a federal program. But the Illinois Department of Public Aid, I think, sends out a check every month.
Yes.
So they're probably going to tie this biometric identification in with cashing your check or proof that you're actually supposed to have a check, or some of the other benefits go along with that. So Fred, that's quite interesting, you know, because the Bible says you won't be able to buy or sell
Yes.
without the mark of the beast. Well, if they consider this a mark, these people won't be able to buy or sell unless they take that biometric identification. Okay, Fred, what do you got there?
Well, I got quite an article here. Both of the informants have convincing evidence to back up their stories. In addition, federal officials have been caught in serious lies and contradictions involving these informants. In the case of Carol Ho, the government has been denying for nearly 2 years that it had any information inside Elohim City. That proved false when Ms. Howe surfaced and the ATF was forced to admit she'd been there operative inside the Elohim community both before and after the bombing. The government still denies her claim that she informed them months ago, before the blast in December '94 of plans to bomb the Murrah building, but refused to turn over her briefing from that period.
Well, of course, you know, you're talking about Tim McVeigh and
Yes.
the bombing, and this woman was inside of this right-wing encampment.
Yes.
And she was an informant for the FBI.
No, the ATF.
Alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. She knew that the bombing was going to take place. She didn't probably know exactly when, but she was feeding out information to law enforcement people, but they didn't act in time, and the rest is history. And today, McVeigh is on trial for his life. He's already been found guilty, and the penalty phase, now they're deciding whether they're going to execute him or not, but it looks like he'll be executed. But in the meantime, Fred, a day that'll go down in infamy. 1943,
Yeah.
June 9th. What happened on that day in history?
43?
Yep, June 9th, 1943.
Well, they didn't invade the Europe that day.
No, that
was before.
That was the day the United States government invaded your paycheck.
Yes.
It was the beginning of the federal withholding tax on payrolls. It was called the pay-as-you-make-it income tax.
Yeah.
In other words, they took it before you got it.
Yes.
That's when they started with what was called a gross and a net. They took from the gross and gave you the net. But that was a day that'll go down in infamy, Fred. June 9th, 1943. And you know that was set up just to help the war effort. It was supposed to be abolished at the end of World War II. But here it is, 1997, 1943, 54 years later, somebody forgot to abolish it. And they're still taking it out of your paycheck, Fred. Go ahead, caller, you're on the air.
Hi, Chuck and Fred. How are you guys doing tonight?
All right, how are you?
Yeah, I'm calling about that lady that called earlier. She was talking about Minnesota Vikings.
Yeah.
Well, I'm Norwegian myself. And, you know, they could change their name. I mean, you have a lot of Indians upset about the Redskins, the Warriors, the Indians, the Chiefs. They're all upset about all that. Now, Minnesota, granted, they've lost all 4 Super Bowls. They could change their name to Minnesota Morons, the Purple Pansies, something of that nature. Now, what do you think about that, Chuck?
I don't know. Sometimes I'm a Vikings fan. When they're playing the Packers, I have to remain neutral. I like the Vikings and the Packers. When they play each other, it's pretty hard to decide which team I'm supporting. But I've been a Vikings fan all these years, and I've got some Swedish heritage in me. I don't know if that qualifies me as a Viking or not.
Take that Badger hat off right now, then.
Yeah.
Take that Badger hat off.
This is a raccoon hat.
And you're a Viking fan.
But you know that years ago I played with a team in the East on Long Island, and we were proud to be called the Indians.
Yeah.
And nobody objected to
Yeah.
anybody calling the Indians.
You're absolutely right, Fred.
Right.
Absolutely right. It's not derogatory in the least.
No.
And I like your Packer hat, too.
Thank you.
Yeah, these days it's. But I don't know. It's everyone's so sensitive about things. Now, if you call it the Minnesota Owl, somebody would get upset about that and picket it because we're picking on owls.
I like the morons or pansies better myself, but
Yeah, well, we'll have to see about that the next time the Packers and the Vikings play, Fred.
Yes.
Those are always knockdown games when
Yes.
they play each other. But here, Fred, on this date in 1980, something very serious happened, and a lot of people out there remember this comedian Richard Pryor was rushed to the hospital after suffering severe third-degree burns over most of his upper body. Pryor was nearly killed when a combination of alcohol and cocaine exploded in a practice called freebasing. And that was before freebasing was cool, Fred. He was one of the early participants of that 1980, that's 17 years ago. Pryor was seen, and of course, that was one of the forerunners of the crack cocaine craze that came in right around that time, too. Pryor was seen ablaze, in other words, his face and his upper body was on fire. And he was running down the street from his house before he collapsed and was rushed to the hospital. He was hospitalized for more than 2 months following the mishap. And you know, ironically, Fred, a miracle happened, and all those scars and stuff were healed miraculously and just left a few faint scars on him. You know, with black people, when they get burned, it leaves some ugly, what's called keloids, or really ugly scars. With him, he was miraculously healed, and now I guess he has some other disease which is confining him to a wheelchair. But he was one of the early proponents of cocaine, and it almost cost him his life there. And many thousands of people have lost their lives because of movie stars like him and others who have glorified drug usage over the years. Did we have a call on there in line one, Roy? Go ahead, caller, you're on the air.
Hi. I was just agreeing with the caller who was talking about the city of Eau Claire interfering in the townships around here. They're doing the same thing, of course, to the city of Altoona, and Altoona is actually a city.
Well, that's right.
There's really not much difference there.
Well, are they kind of muscling in on the western side of Altoona there, or what?
Well, you know, the so-called inner bypass.
Mm.
The city of Eau Claire chose that route because it would be advantageous to Eau Claire.
It would also be
managed to get the DOT to agree with them.
It would also be advantageous to some of the people that had speculated on that land over the years, too.
That very probably so. But I kind of think that it's a kick in the teeth to build a road through one city just to be helping out a different city altogether to take their traffic.
Well, I notice now they've backed off on the starting date of that. They had to back it up a few years because they're finding it hard to get funding.
Yeah, isn't it wonderful?
Yeah, and they, but I'll tell you, you got to watch that bunch down there in Madison, Democrat and Republican alike. They figure out ways to. They don't say we're going to. They don't call them taxes. They call them fees, and they're going to bump up the license plates fees and drivers. They're going to figure out some side end run there, like in football. You do an end run to get around an obstacle. You do an end run. Well, they're to make it appear like we're not raising taxes. They're going to raise some more fees to try and finance that.
Oh, taxes go under many names, I think.
Yeah, there's still taxes, though, because it still comes out of your pocket on a regular basis.
You're darn right, and it goes to the government, so therefore it's a tax.
Yep, they just changed the name of it, and they're learning how to manipulate things like that so they can come back to you like some VIPs from Madison came up here not too long ago and said, yes, we promised we wouldn't raise your taxes, and we didn't. And to me, it was just a bald-faced lie because not too long before that, they'd raised all kinds of fees, and those are taxes.
You're darn right. I'm hoping that the inner bypass will just be postponed a year here and a year there and so on, and that they'll still won't have it started in 10, 20 years' time with any luck.
Well, it's going to take some of that nice virgin, pristine land down in there and grind it all up and put pavement on top of it. And then I guess there's a couple new bridges have to go over the Eau Claire River. And then it's all going to spill out into the Birch Street area there.
And it's all just supposed to be for the Hastings Way traffic. It's not really even intended to be for the bypass for the US 53 traffic. It's really intended for the local people to use.
Yeah, I never could figure out why all them businesses along Hastings Way would have wanted to go along with something like that, where they're going to move all of the traffic and business over a few blocks to the east.
Oh, hey, don't you see? It's so close that if people actually want to go over to Hastings Way, it's only a couple blocks away.
Yeah,
They'll be able to get there just fine. It'll be convenient for the people who want to travel between the north and south parts of Eau Claire. It's really intended to be for the local traffic. In other words, they want to have a relief road for a busy Eau Claire city street, but they want to put it in Altoona.
well, even if they've all, that's already been settled, they're going to have it eventually, but we're still going
Too bad that they didn't assume in Altoona to prevent that.
It's a bit difficult to obstruct the city of Eau Claire. Just ask all of the people who live in Eau Claire and the woman in the town of Washington and so on. The Eau Claire City Council is like a bulldozer.
Well, they've got people behind them supplying the fuel.
How true.
They're
By the
just-
way, Chuck, I notice you're not wearing your jewelry tonight.
Yeah, it's summertime, and it's just getting too hot. We had to put aside some of that stuff and go on from there. But I agree with you, and you know, eventually they're still going to have to build an outer bypass to skirt around the eastern side of what now is basically a suburban area. Eau Claire, Altoona, Haley, Chippewa Falls, that's one, and Union Township, Washington Township, that's one big urban area now. And we still need a way of skirting that to the east and getting up past Chippewa and to go up north, and also to get up onto 29 to that 4-lane there and then head east. So we still need a true outer bypass for the eastern side of the metropolitan Eau Claire area.
Which just proves my point that, of course, the inner route wasn't chosen for the Highway 53 traffic. It was really just chosen for the local Eau Claire traffic.
Well, thank you for your comments. We appreciate them, and thanks for viewing. And continue to tune in.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay,
Well-
Fred.
What the federal agents can't explain away, however, is their own admission that in extensive debriefings 2 days before the bombing, Miss Howe specifically named Elohim City resident Andrea Strassmeyer and White House Aryan resistance leader Dennis McMahon as members of the bomb plot, and yet federal authorities have made no effort to question or apprehend them.
Okay, yeah, we've already pretty much seen where that all went, Fred. That's all water under the bridge now, and
Yeah, but they did the same thing in New York when they blew up that downtown building, and they had the information before, and they let them go ahead and do it.
yeah, Betty Shabazz's daughter was set up by the FBI too when they tried to get her to agree to a plot to kill Louis Farrakhan.
Yeah,
And now look what happened to Betty Shabazz.
yeah.
She's laying in a hospital bed, half dead from third-degree burns from her own 12-year-old, was a nephew or a grandson.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so a lot of things are interrelated. Well, Fred, I took this off the internet and we didn't get around to it last time. It's activist says China sells prison goods, and we brought that up on this show many times over the years, and a lot of people scoffed and laughed at us. But Harry Wu, a human rights campaigner who was a Chinese prisoner himself for 19 years, told U.S. senators today in Washington, D.C., that he has proof that U.S. companies are selling illegally imported Chinese prison goods. In other words, in a lot of cases from Chinese slave labor, people for one reason or another, political prisoners, Christian prisoners, other people, Tibetan prisoners, are forced under threat of physical destruction or severe beatings and And in some cases, like this guy here was in prison for 19 years. In some cases, they're in prison their whole life in the gulags of China, just like the gulags used to be in Russia. China has their gulag system where they use forced labor at little or no pay. Sometimes you trade your labor for your life and for a little bit of food, scraps of food to keep you alive. And these goods that these people, these Christian prisoners, a lot of them have been martyred. Some of them from the Tiananmen Square massacre that's managed to survive, that were scooped up by the police and soldiers and disappeared into the gulags, are right now building some of the clothes and shoes and trinkets and maybe even, well, this flag's made in the USA, but this mug here is made in China. It's getting so that just about everything you see in the stores, Fred, or a lot of things are made in China. And a lot of these things are made by forced slave labor. And so this activist came to Washington with some of the proof, talking about how Kmart is selling some of these poisoned goods. And Wu also showed sports shirts with the Playboy, Esprit, and Arnold Palmer labels that were made by slave labor. He says some of these things were handmade, hand-assembled by Chinese female prisoners, and for just pennies an hour, Fred, if you could even figure that. And I'm sure once they were paid, that money was taken right back and forced to where they had to give that money right back to purchase food to stay alive. Go ahead, caller, you're on the air.
Okay. Are you there?
Yes.
Okay. In regards to this Gateway Drive extension, at 7 o'clock on last Monday morning, the Housing Authority had a meeting and put out a request for proposals. And I'll read this to you a little bit here. The project be constructed or acquired and renovated in the city of Eau Claire, specifically including the area north of East Hamilton Avenue and adjacent to Gateway Drive, extended, containing dwelling unit of necessary accommodations which satisfy the authority criteria at affordable housing costs for persons lacking the necessary income, property rights in which can be acquired by the authority. They need that land out there for low-income housing. So what they're doing is they're adding a little insult to injury to this lady. First of all, they condemn her land and take her land, put the road through. Now they're wanting to put low-income housing there.
And then we'll have to import the low-income people to fill the housing.
Well, of course. But see, this is necessary because all of the housing that has been destructed in the city of Eau Claire recently, they used federal funds to clear the Forest Avenue area of all of the housing along Chippewa River. Well, when they clear that, they have to provide housing for low-income people to replace that on a unit-by-unit basis. The Bellinger Street area was stripped of housing. They had to replace housing for that area. The Lakeshore School area was stripped low-income housing. So the city of Eau Claire has a lot of low-income housing units that they must construct one way or another to replace all of this housing that's been stripped out of the city by urban renewal.
Well, I'll tell you, I was never much for a city getting into the housing business. You'd think that there's plenty of landlords and realtors that know what the free enterprise system's about and know about supply and demand to take care of the housing problems without the city housing authority and the county housing authority getting into the business and competing against private enterprise.
Well, whenever you take federal money, you also take the federal rules and regulations. If you take a unit of low-income housing, you replace a unit of low-income housing somewhere else in the city.
Yeah. Well, I know the county went into the city of Altoona and bought up some pricey lots over there and built, over $1 million worth of low-income housing, and all of a sudden a lot of foreigners started popping up in Altoona. So go figure.
Yeah.
Do we really need the housing, or do we create the housing and then import people in to use that housing?
Well, we sure do use eminent domain to take this lady's land. She has had, I think, 10, 20, 30 acres there for a number of years. Now it's going to be urbanized. And it sounds as though that a portion of it is going to be put into low-income, high-density housing.
Huh. Well, that's all we need. Well, thanks a lot, caller, for that information, and we'll have to investigate that, maybe get a camera up there before the next show and see what that's all about, Freddie.
Yes.
Okay, Fred, well, hopefully this here won't come with all this low-income housing. The Chupacabra's mystery spreads. Reports of strange, winged, devilish-looking creatures with fangs are increasing. And these strange creatures have been seen in Puerto Rico, South America, Central America, Mexico, United States, and Spain. Investigations by Jorge Martin into this mystery has revealed several interesting facts. One, the chupacabras, that's what they're called, are often seen in the vicinity of UFO activity. Two, both the U.S. military and the Argentine military seem to be involved with these creatures. Three, there's evidence of chupacabra activity as far back as 1960, and the U.S. government was aware of it. And four, chupacabra activity is related to the cattle or animal mutilation phenomena that we've been hearing about for the last 20 years all across the country. You know, the odd thing about all those mutilations, Fred, is the blood's usually totally drained from the animal, but they don't even find any on the fur or anything near the puncture marks. But now they're saying that this weird-looking, winged, devilish-looking creature with fangs is appearing more and more around those places I mentioned. And they're eating everything from, they're draining the blood from everything from elk and deer and rabbits and birds, and all kinds of wild animals are getting involved. Go ahead, caller, you're on the air.
Yeah, my name is John.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just listening. It's actually the first time I ever watched the show. I was just kind of flipping through the channels, but I was listening, and the lady was talking about how it's not part of Eau Claire and intact, whatever. But I was thinking that people are just going to have to adapt to the way that Eau Claire is expanding. I mean, it is the largest town in this part of the state, and I mean, pretty soon Altoona is just going to be part of Eau Claire, and so is Chippewa, and we're going to need those routes for our own business and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's Altoona's right up against Eau Claire now, but they are sovereign cities in their own right. Chippewa Falls wouldn't want to be swallowed up by Eau Claire, and neither does Altoona. And of course, Halley, they're in between Chippewa and Eau Claire, and they feel like they've been in a tug of war up there. But these cities all have their own history and their own mayor or their own forms of government, and they have the right to do that, and it's not the right of the city of Eau Claire to infringe on another city or township's rights. Okay, Freddie boy, well, it looks like it's the old clock on the wall says it's that time again, Fred, and you're trying to conquer cancer with grapes now? Is that the deal?
I think that we ought to, How to Conquer Cancer Naturally by Dr. Johanna Brandt, and she uses grapes successfully.
The grape cure. Well, we appreciate you tuning in tonight, and we'll see you again right here on the old Cow Report next time about, I think the rerun will be next Monday at 2, and then after that we'll have another live show 2 weeks from tonight. So thanks for tuning in. We'll see you right here again next time. Adios, amigos and amiguettes.